It was one of those afternoons that feel too quiet for their own good. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears when the world has nothing new to say. I'd just finished my grocery run, the paper bags biting into my hands, and all I could think about was a cup of tea and an early dinner. My knees ached, my back protested, and everything about that day screamed routine until I stepped into the elevator. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I pressed the button for the 5th floor, humming softly to myself. A small, harmless moment, until the doors slid open again on the 3rd floor and Martin Cole stepped in. He lived 2 floors below me. I didn't know much about him, only that he worked from home and kept to himself. A man who always smiled, always nodded politely in the hallway. But that afternoon, he didn't smile. His breathing was sharp, uneven, like he'd been running. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair damp with sweat. He didn't meet my eyes. "Martin?" I said softly. "Are you all right?" He didn't answer right away. His hand trembled as he reached into his pocket, pulling out something small and folded, a note. He didn't hand it to me openly. Instead, he brushed it against my palm like he was passing contraband. "What's this?" I whispered. His voice was barely there. "Don't say anything, just read it when you're alone." My throat went dry. The doors closed again, and for a few seconds, the hum of the elevator filled the silence between us. I tried to look at him, but his face was pale, his jaw clenched tight. He wasn't just nervous, he was terrified. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing a small laugh. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Please, Evelyn," he said, his voice cracking. "Do what the note says. Trust me." Before I could respond, the elevator jerked slightly. I grabbed the railing for balance, my heart pounding. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. He shook his head, eyes darting to the camera in the corner. "Not a joke. Don't ask questions, just act sick, now." "What?" He leaned closer. "Fake it, right now." Something in his tone, the sheer desperation, made my body move before my brain caught up. I clutched my chest and gasped, stumbling against the wall. "Oh God, I don't feel so good." He hit the emergency stop and pried the door open just enough to slip his fingers through. "Go," he hissed. "Get out, Evelyn!" My groceries scattered across the floor as I crawled through the small opening, landing awkwardly in the hallway. The doors closed behind me with a metallic thud. For a moment, I just sat there, heart hammering, ears ringing. Then I heard him whisper, just before the elevator started again, "I'm sorry." I blinked, confused. Sorry for what? But he was already gone, carried upward in that humming steel box. I stood alone in the hallway, surrounded by my fallen groceries. A carton of milk leaked slowly across the floor. The faint smell of iron and something else, fear maybe, hung in the air. I wanted to go after him, to demand an explanation, but my legs wouldn't move. Then within minutes, everything changed. Sirens screamed from outside, sharp, echoing through the concrete walls. Neighbors opened their doors, faces pale and puzzled. I moved to the window and saw flashing red and blue lights pooling in the parking lot below. Someone shouted from the stairwell, "The elevator's stuck!" Another voice, panicked, high-pitched, "There's blood! Someone call an ambulance!" The floor beneath me seemed to tilt. I gripped the wall, trying to breathe. My mind raced back to Martin's trembling hands, his pleading eyes, the note burning a hole in my palm. I tore it open. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. "Get out of here if you want to live." My stomach dropped. By the time I reached the lobby, police officers had cordoned off the area. The elevator doors were wedged open, lights still blinking inside. I caught a glimpse, just enough to see paramedics kneeling over someone motionless. One of the officers turned toward me. "Ma'am, please step back." I heard myself ask, Is it Martin Cole?" The officer hesitated, his face softening. "You should go back upstairs, ma'am." Which was answer enough. I stumbled back into the hallway, numb. The chatter of neighbors blurred into static. Theories, rumors, fear spreading like smoke. Someone said Martin had been attacked. Someone else said it was a heart attack. None of it made sense. Back inside my apartment, I sank into a chair, staring at the note still clutched in my hand. "Get out if you want to live." I whispered the words again and again, my mind spinning through every possibility. Why me? What danger could I possibly be in? I replayed every second in that elevator. His shaking hands. The way he avoided the camera. The way he whispered my name like it was the last thing he'd ever say. My kitchen clock ticked louder than usual. Outside, the sirens faded, replaced by the low hum of voices downstairs. Somewhere in the distance, a door slammed. I sat there for hours, staring at that note. My heartbeat refused to calm down. A man I barely knew had just saved my life and lost his own. And as night settled over the building, one thought refused to leave my mind. If Martin was warning me, then someone else wanted me dead. The thought made my skin crawl. The building, once familiar and safe, suddenly felt like a cage. Every sound, a creak, a footstep, a whisper, what made me flinch. I looked down at the note again. The paper was crumpled now, damp from my hands. I whispered to myself, as if saying it aloud might make sense of it all. Why me, Martin? What did you know? The wind rattled the window. Somewhere above, the elevator groaned faintly, mechanical, hollow, and far too alive. That was when I realized the truth that would haunt me for months to come. Someone in this building had killed Martin Cole, and they had meant to kill me instead. The next morning, the sirens were gone, but the silence they left behind was worse. The elevator was sealed off, yellow tape crossing its doors like a wound. I couldn't stop thinking about that note and Martin's pale face. I needed answers, something solid to hold on to. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, so I did what I always do when I can't breathe. I organized. I opened the closet, pulled down the dusty boxes marked Thomas, personal, and sat on the floor. "All right, Tom," I whispered. "Let's see what you were hiding." The papers smelled like time and old ink. Insurance documents, letters, receipts, everything perfectly arranged, just like him. Then, halfway through a folder of old tax forms, a name jumped out at me. Martin Cole. I froze. It was underlined twice in Thomas's handwriting. My stomach dropped. No, that can't be right. I looked closer. Next to Martin's name were dated invoices, some from 5 years ago, consulting fees, security audits, and at the bottom a scribbled note in fading blue ink. "Tell Evelyn if anything happens." My pulse hammered. I ran my fingers over the letters, whispering, "You knew him. You actually knew him." I thought back to late nights when Thomas would take long calls, speaking quietly in the study, closing the door just enough to tell me not to ask. I never pressed. After 30 years of marriage, you learn which silences not to disturb. But now that silence felt like a scream. The apartment suddenly felt too small, too still. I needed air. I stepped into the hallway. Every door looked the same as it always had, yet something was off. People who normally said hello now avoided eye contact. Mrs. Miller's door, usually wide open with the smell of cookies pouring out, was shut tight. The Peterson twins, loud as ever, whispered instead of shouted. I walked slower, scanning faces, listening to the faint echo of voices behind thin walls. Everyone seemed to know something I didn't. As I turned the corner, Luis, the young maintenance tech, nearly bumped into me. He held a toolbox, headphones hanging around his neck. "Sorry, Miss Hart. Didn't see you there?" "That's all right, Luis," I said, steadying myself. "You wouldn't happen to know what's going on with the elevator, would you?" He hesitated. "They told me to leave it sealed till the police finish." "I see." I lowered my voice. "Martin Cole. He lived on your floor, didn't he?" Luis looked away. "Yeah, good guy. Always fixed his own stuff so I didn't have to." "You heard what happened?" He nodded slowly. "Hard not to. Everyone's talking." "What are they saying?" He shifted his weight. "Depends on who you ask. Some say it was a robbery. Others say it wasn't random." The words stuck in my chest. "What do you think?" "I think—" He lowered his voice, eyes darting toward the stairwell camera. "I think someone didn't want the truth on tape." "What do you mean?" He looked around again, nervous. "There's a gap in the security footage. A 5-minute blackout right when the elevator stopped." I blinked. "You're sure?" "Positive. I check the system every day. Cameras don't just skip like that." I felt the air leave my lungs. Then someone erased it. "Or replaced it," he said. "Either way, that's not an accident." A cold sweat crept down my back. "Luis, can you see who accessed it?" He hesitated. "I shouldn't even be talking about it." "Please." My voice cracked before I could stop it. "He saved my life, Luis. I need to understand why." He studied my face for a long moment, then sighed. "Look, I'll check the logs, but if anyone finds out I showed you—" "They won't," I promised. "You have my word." He nodded, adjusting his cap. "All right, but Ms. Hart, don't trust anyone in this building." I forced a shaky smile. That advice sounds familiar. He gave me a confused look, but before he could ask, someone called from down the hall, Greta, the building manager. "Luis, I need you on 7. He straightened. "I gotta go. Just be careful, okay?" I watched him disappear into the stairwell, toolbox clanging softly against the railing. When the hallway emptied, I leaned against the wall. My knees were trembling again. Martin's note, Thomas's handwriting, a blackout in the footage. This wasn't coincidence. This was a thread, one someone had tried hard to cut. Back inside, I spread the documents across the table. There was more: letters, bank receipts, payments to something labeled Cole Consulting. The numbers weren't huge, but they repeated every month for nearly 2 years. "Why, Thomas?" I whispered. "What were you doing with him?" The phone rang suddenly, slicing through the quiet. I jumped. "Mrs. Hart?" It was Greta's voice, polite but sharp. "Just letting you know the elevator will stay closed another day. The police are still investigating. Do they know what happened yet?" A pause. "It's under review. Try not to worry yourself, dear. These things have a way of sorting out." I could almost hear the forced smile in her voice. "I'm sure they do," I said, hanging up before she could say more. I stared at the papers again. Sorting out. No, this wasn't sorting out. It was being buried. As night fell, I couldn't stop pacing. My reflection in the window looked older, harder. I realized I wasn't just frightened anymore. I was angry. Angry that no one would tell me the truth. Angry that my husband might have been part of something that led to a man's death. Angry that I had to piece together a puzzle everyone else wanted to keep hidden. Then a soft knock came at my door. I froze. When I opened it, Luis stood there, glancing nervously down the hall. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered. "But I checked the logs." My heart raced. "And there's one request to view the camera data from last week," he said. "Only one." "Who?" He swallowed hard. "Someone from this building. It was approved through management." "Luis, tell me the name." He looked over his shoulder, then leaned in. "I can't be sure, but the user ID matches an owner's profile." "An owner?" My voice was barely a whisper. He nodded. "And from what I can see, it was accessed 2 days before the elevator incident." The room seemed to tilt again. "You mean someone watched the footage before Martin died?" "Yeah." He stepped back. "Someone wanted to know what he was doing." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Do you know who?" Luis hesitated, torn. Then, barely above a breath, he said, "Someone asked to see the recordings last week." "Who?" I pressed. He looked down at his shoes, shaking his head. "That's the part I don't understand." He met my eyes. "Because the name on the request, it's redacted. Someone with higher clearance wiped it." I stared at him, speechless. He whispered, "This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Hart. Someone planned this." The air between us felt heavy, electric. He adjusted his cap again. "You didn't hear this from me. I'll call you if I find more." Then he was gone, disappearing into the dim stairwell like smoke. I stood there in the doorway, my hand still gripping the frame, my heart thudding so hard it hurt. The building felt alive, walls breathing, lights humming faintly overhead. I turned and looked at the papers scattered across my table. Thomas's handwriting stared back at me. "Tell Evelyn if anything happens." I finally understood what that meant. He'd known something was coming. I sank into a chair, staring at the mess before me. Martin had died protecting me. Thomas had tried to warn me. And someone else, someone here, was still watching. The hallway was quiet again, but my head wasn't. Names kept circling in my mind like restless birds. Greta, the building manager. Mrs. Miller, the Peterson twins. And then, louder than the rest, Jonah, my son, and Lila, his perfect, charming wife with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. I sat by the kitchen table whispering their names under my breath, one after another. Jonah, Lila, Greta. Each name felt heavier than the one before. I wasn't accusing them, not yet, but something inside me whispered that one of those names was connected to the truth. When I called Jonah, he picked up on the second ring. "Mom, it's late. Everything okay?" "No," I said quietly. "It's not." He sighed. "Is this about the elevator again?" "You need to rest. You've been through a shock. Jonah, listen to me." My voice cracked and I steadied it. "Martin Cole knew your father." Silence. Then he laughed nervously. "Mom, that doesn't make any sense." "Dad's been gone for years." "I found Thomas's papers," I said. Martin's name was there, underlined. He worked with your father on something. And now he's dead. He exhaled sharply. You shouldn't be digging through Dad's old files. You're just upsetting yourself. I'm not imagining this, Jonah. My voice rose without meaning to. There's something wrong here. Martin warned me that day for a reason. Someone wanted me in that elevator. Mom, stop, he said, cutting me off. You've always had an overactive imagination. You're grieving, that's all. I buried your father 6 years ago. Don't tell me I'm still grieving. His tone hardened. You need to stop looking for ghosts. Lila and I are worried about you. The mention of her name felt like ice water. Oh, I'm sure Lila's very concerned, I said bitterly. Mom, no, I whispered. She's not as sweet as you think. You ever notice how she listens more than she speaks? How she smiles when others argue? He groaned. You're doing it again. Doing what? Turning everyone into suspects. You did this after Dad died too. That's because no one told me the truth then either, I snapped. A long pause followed. I could hear his breathing through the phone, slow, controlled. I think you should get some rest, he said finally. We'll come by this weekend. And then he hung up. The silence after the call felt like punishment. I wanted to believe he was right, that I was chasing shadows. But the pit in my stomach said otherwise. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying Martin's face, his trembling hand as he slipped me the note. He wasn't warning me as a stranger. He knew me. He knew something about my family. By morning, my nerves were raw. I opened the front door to get some air and froze. An envelope lay on the floor. No name, no stamp, just thin beige paper folded neatly in half. I crouched down, hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a newspaper clipping. A small article about an embezzlement investigation at a local bank. Someone had circled a sentence in red ink. Funds were traced to several dormant estates and family trusts. At the bottom, a handwritten note. It started with the estate. My hands shook as I read it again. The estate. My husband's estate. I grabbed Thomas's old files from the cabinet and dumped them across the table. For hours, I sifted through documents, my heart pounding as I searched for something, anything that matched. And then I found it. A faded ledger marked private holdings. Page after page listed transactions from our joint account, transfers to unfamiliar companies. Names like Greenway Consulting, LG Solutions, and Harper Holdings. At first I didn't see the pattern. Then I looked closer at the initials. LG Lila Grant. My throat tightened. No, this can't be. I traced the amounts, small at first, then larger, all from the year before Thomas died. Thomas, what were you doing? I whispered. My chest felt heavy. Lila's family was well off, always talking about business ventures and property developments. I never cared to ask where the money came from. But now, it looked like some of it came from us. The phone rang again, and this time it was Lila herself. Evelyn, I heard you called Jonah last night. Everything all right? Her voice was syrupy sweet, the same tone she used on neighbors she didn't like. I'm fine, I said slowly. Just trying to make sense of some things. Oh, she said, her tone tightening. What kind of things? I picked up the ledger from the table. Financial things. Old transactions from when Thomas was alive. A pause, then a forced laugh. Goodness, that's ancient history. Why dig up that stuff now? Because one of the names in these documents belongs to your family's company. She went silent for a long beat. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything yet, I said, trying to sound calm. But if your family was involved in Thomas's finances, I'd like to know why. Evelyn, she said carefully, I think grief is clouding your memory. Thomas invested in a lot of things. Maybe you're misreading something. Her voice was too steady, too prepared. I can read just fine, I said. Then maybe you should take those papers to an accountant, she snapped, her tone suddenly sharper. Someone qualified. The mask was cracking. I could hear it in her voice. I might do that, I replied quietly. You wouldn't happen to know what LG Solutions stands for, would you? A long pause. I don't have time for this, she said quickly. Jonah and I will come by this weekend like he said. Try not to spiral before then. She hung up before I could reply. I sat there, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. I could almost hear Thomas's voice from years ago, warning me to pay attention, to stop trusting smiles. That afternoon, I walked to the manager's office downstairs. Greta looked up from her computer when I entered. Evelyn, dear, she said with that patronizing smile of hers. How are you holding up? I just needed to ask something, I said. Did anyone new move into the building recently? She frowned. Not that I recall. Why? I hesitated. Because Martin Cole died, and I'm starting to think he wasn't the only one in danger. Her eyebrows rose. Evelyn, that's quite an accusation. The police have it under control. Do they? I asked softly. Or are they being told what to find? Her expression froze. You should be careful what you suggest. I'm beyond careful, I said. I just want the truth. When I turned to leave, she said, You know, Mrs. Cole came by the day before the accident. She was asking questions, too. That stopped me. What kind of questions? About the building's tenants, she said, shrugging. I thought she was just curious. Maybe she wasn't. I walked back to my apartment, the hallways suddenly colder than before. Everyone I passed looked away. Even the Peterson twins stopped whispering when I got close. It was as if the whole building had been told to keep quiet. I locked my door and leaned against it, heart pounding. My world had started to unravel. First Martin, now my own son's wife tangled up in my husband's financial history. I looked again at the note. It started with the estate. Maybe Thomas had known about the missing money. Maybe that's why he'd written "Tell Evelyn if anything happens." Martin wasn't just protecting me. He was finishing something Thomas couldn't. I gathered the papers, slid them into a folder, and placed them in my desk drawer. I knew I'd just crossed a line. I wasn't a grieving widow anymore. I was investigating my own family. As I sat down, I whispered to myself, You wanted me to know, Thomas. Well, now I do. But the realization didn't bring comfort, only dread. Because if Lila's family was part of whatever this was, then Jonah. My breath caught. If he knew, if he helped her, then I hadn't just lost my husband. I'd lost the son I raised. I stared at the door, afraid of what would come next. I barely slept that night. Every sound in the building, a pipe creaking, a door closing, made me flinch. The thought of Martin's warning note replayed in my head over and over. Get out of here if you want to live. He hadn't just been scared. He'd been desperate. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was done guessing. I was going to find proof. I found Luis by the elevators, holding his toolbox and wiping grease off his hands. Luis, I said quietly, I need your help. He looked up startled. Morning, Ms. Hart. Something wrong with your heater again? No, I whispered. The cameras. I need to see the backups from the day Martin died. His brow furrowed. That's police stuff now. I shouldn't... Please, I cut in. You said there was a gap in the footage. I need to see it with my own eyes. He shifted uneasily. You shouldn't get involved in this. I already am, I said. You know that. He hesitated, then exhaled. All right, meet me in the maintenance room in 15 minutes. And keep quiet about it. When I stepped into that small, windowless room, the air smelled faintly of metal and dust. The hum of the security monitors filled the silence. Luis sat in front of a row of screens, typing quickly. He gestured for me to stand beside him. These are the backups from that week. I had to pull them manually. The main system was locked. The screen flickered, showing a grainy hallway view. I saw myself, clutching grocery bags, stepping into the elevator. Martin followed seconds later. My stomach twisted. There, Luis said, pointing. Watch this part. The timestamp ticked forward, then suddenly jumped 5 minutes ahead. The footage froze for a second before continuing, showing the elevator doors open and chaos erupting in the lobby. It's gone, I whispered, the moment he gave me the note. Exactly, Luis said. 5 minutes wiped clean. Can you recover it? He shook his head. Not without admin-level access. That means someone deleted it from the top. Someone in management, I murmured. He nodded grimly. There's more. Look at this. He switched to another clip, the hallway outside the maintenance office, time-stamped the night before Martin's death. Lila. She was wearing a pale coat and sunglasses, though it was dark. A large black tote hung from her shoulder, heavy enough that she used both hands to lift it. I felt my chest tighten. Why would she be down there? Don't know, Luis said. But she signed into the building's camera system 2 days before. Said she wanted to check for a delivery issue. I stared at him, my pulse hammering. How do you know that? He hesitated. Because I approved the request. Greta told me to. Greta? I asked sharply. The building manager? He nodded. Yeah. Said the request came from an owner's account, Lila Grant Hart. The name hit me like a blow. I turned away from the screen, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. My daughter-in-law had access to the cameras before Martin died? That's what it says, he said quietly. And the night before, she was right here. My throat went dry. Luis, can you copy these clips for me? That's risky, he said, glancing nervously toward the hallway. If management finds out, they won't, I said. Please. After a long pause, he plugged in a flash drive and started copying. If anything happens, he muttered. I was never here. Understood, I whispered. When the file transfer finished, I tucked the drive into my jacket pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Luis, I said softly, do you think this was an accident? He looked at me for a long time, then said, No, ma'am. I think someone wanted to make sure you didn't see what really happened. As I left the maintenance room, I felt eyes on me. I glanced down the hallway and saw Greta standing by the stairwell. She smiled faintly. Evelyn, she said, her voice sugary as ever. What brings you down here? Just needed to talk to Luis, I replied quickly. Oh? She tilted her head. About what? I forced a small laugh. The heat. It's been spotty again. She nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing a little. Right. Well, you know where to find me if you need anything. I do, I said, stepping past her. Her smile didn't fade, but something cold passed through her eyes. When I got back to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trembling. My hands felt numb. I turned on the lamp and spread Thomas's papers across the table beside the new evidence. The ledger, the clipping, the USB drive, each piece a fragment of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. Then my phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message read, Stop digging or you'll end up like him. I stared at it for a full minute, unable to breathe. Then another message arrived. You're not safe, Mrs. Hart. I dropped the phone onto the table. My heart pounded in my ears. Someone knew. Someone was watching me right now. I grabbed the flash drive and walked to the bedroom. Behind the bottom drawer of my dresser was a false panel Thomas had built years ago, a hiding spot for passports and cash. I placed the drive and documents inside, sliding the panel back into place. Then I turned off the lights. The apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down. Maybe it was paranoia. Maybe the text was just a cruel prank. But then I heard it, a soft creak from the living room floorboards. I froze, another step, slow, careful. Someone was inside. I reached for the lamp, my hands trembling so badly I nearly knocked it over. The moment I turned it on, the sound stopped. The air felt heavy, charged. I stood, heart hammering, and moved toward the living room. The shadows stretched long across the floor. For a split second, I saw movement near my desk, a tall, slender figure bending over. Who's there? I shouted. No answer. The front door clicked open, then closed softly. I ran forward, flipping the lights on. The room was empty. The curtains swayed slightly, the air still warm from someone's presence. My desk drawer was open. The envelope that had held Martin's note, gone. I stood there, gripping the edge of the desk, breathing hard. The fear that had been simmering for days finally boiled over. I wasn't imagining things. Someone had broken in. Someone had touched the one piece of evidence I had left in plain sight. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. Through the window, the city lights blurred like distant fires. For the first time, I felt truly alone in that building. Not because no one cared, but because someone cared too much to let me keep digging. I locked every bolt, drew the curtains, and sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in my lap, listening. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every few minutes I thought I heard footsteps again. But maybe that was just the sound of my own heart, too loud, too scared, too determined to stop. Because even through the fear, one thought cut through like glass. Someone wanted those files. Someone didn't want me to find out what Martin knew. And now they'd crossed my door to make sure of it. I spent the whole morning pretending it was just dinner, chopping vegetables, setting the table, lighting a single candle. But every move I made was calculated. The files from Luis were hidden beneath the lace tablecloth, inside a small envelope taped to the underside. Tonight wasn't about food. It was about truth. When Jonah and Lila arrived, they looked picture-perfect as always. Lila in her soft blue dress, Jonah still in his work shirt, sleeves rolled up. I greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Mom, this looks nice," Jonah said, kissing my cheek. "What's the occasion?" Oh, nothing special, I said lightly. Just thought we could all use a quiet evening. Lila's smile was tight. How sweet. You even cooked. Of course. It's been a while since we sat together like this. I gestured toward the table. Please, have a seat. Luis came in next, carrying a tray of wine glasses, and behind him was Ravi, quiet, polite, eyes sharp. I'd asked them to help under the pretense of serving, but they knew why they were really there. They'd seen the footage, too. The room felt heavy before we even began eating. So, I said, passing the salad bowl, how's work, Jonah? He smiled faintly. Busy. Lila's been helping with some of the estate paperwork you gave me last month. Trying to make sense of it all. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Has she? Lila didn't flinch. Just trying to organize things for you, Evelyn. You've had so much on your mind lately. I forced a soft laugh. That's very thoughtful of you. She looked at me for a long second, then smiled too brightly. You know me. I just like things. Neat. Luis exchanged a glance with me across the table. He was nervous, shifting his glass in small circles. Ravi stayed silent, observing. The conversation crawled along, small talk painted over tension. I waited, timing every breath until dessert plates were cleared. That's when I said, Before you go, I'd like to show you something. Jonah leaned back, frowning. What's this about? Just a little video I found. I reached under the table, fingers brushing the edge of the hidden envelope. My heart thudded in my chest. Luis plugged the small drive into my old laptop on the counter and turned the screen toward us. The grainy footage began to play. A hallway, dimly lit. The camera outside the maintenance office. The timestamp blinking. 2 nights before Martin's death. A woman appeared, walking briskly, carrying a black tote. She looked up briefly before entering the office. Jonah squinted. Wait, is that... Lila's voice cut through him, sharper than usual. Where did you get this? Her hand tightened on her wine glass. It doesn't matter where, I said softly. What matters is what it shows. That's not me, she said immediately. It's someone who looks like me. It's you, Lila, Luis said quietly. The system logs match your access request. She turned to him, her eyes cold. You had no right to dig through that. I had every right, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Martin's death wasn't random. You were in that office the night before. You replaced a drive. Why? Jonah stared at her. Lila, what is she talking about? She let out a shaky laugh. She's losing it, Jonah. Your mother's been obsessed since that man died. Now she's accusing me? Answer the question, I said. Why were you in the office? I told you, I wasn't. The air in the room thickened. Jonah looked between us, confusion written all over his face. Mom, he said slowly, you can't just throw around accusations like this. Lila wouldn't what? I snapped. Wouldn't lie? Wouldn't smile while stealing from us? Because that's exactly what she did, Jonah. He blinked. What are you talking about? The estate. Thomas's estate. The transfers, the shell accounts, all connected to her family's company. Jonah's face went pale. That's insane. Is it? I reached into the envelope again and slid out a printed ledger. Look at the names, the initials. LG Solutions. Tell me that's a coincidence. He grabbed the paper, eyes scanning it. Lila? But Lila didn't look at him. Her jaw was tight, her fingers digging into the tablecloth. I did what I had to do, she said finally, voice trembling with fury. You think I wanted any of this? Your father left debts, unfinished deals. I was fixing his mess. I slammed my hand on the table. By laundering money through my husband's estate? It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. She shouted. I was protecting this family, protecting Jonah. Jonah stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. Protecting me? By lying to my mother? She turned to him, tears forming but her tone sharp. You don't understand. Your mother's been digging where she shouldn't. She's putting us all in danger. From who? I asked. Who are you protecting us from, Lila? She looked at me, and for a second I saw it. Fear. Genuine fear. You don't get it, she whispered. They're watching everything. Even now. I took a step forward. Who is? She didn't answer. Luis exchanged a look with Ravi, both uneasy. Jonah rubbed his face, his voice cracking. Lila, what did you do? Lila glared at me. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? You had to drag everyone down with you. Her phone suddenly buzzed on the table. She snatched it up, glancing at the screen, and froze. What is it? Jonah asked. Her lips trembled. It's from immigration. Jonah frowned. What? She looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. You did this. I crossed my arms, holding her gaze. Your passport's been flagged, hasn't it? Her face went white. You called them. No, I said calmly. They called me. Someone reported suspicious transfers linked to your travel plans. I didn't have to say a word. You've ruined my life, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm saving it, I said quietly. For Jonah, for the truth. Jonah stared at her, torn apart. Tell me it's not true, Lila, please. She didn't answer. The silence said enough. He sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair. God, Lila, what did you get us into? Lila's composure shattered. She stood, trembling, her voice breaking between rage and fear. You think I'm the villain here? You have no idea what your father was involved in. Martin's death, that was just the start. My stomach turned. What do you mean? But she only laughed bitterly. Ask your husband's old partners. Ask Martin's friends. You're chasing ghosts, Evelyn. Then she stormed toward the door, yanking it open. Lila! Jonah called after her, but she didn't stop. The door slammed shut. For a long time, no one spoke. Only the sound of my own breathing filled the silence. Jonah finally whispered, What if she's telling the truth? What if Dad— I shook my head slowly. No, whatever Thomas did, he didn't deserve this. And neither did Martin. Jonah's eyes were wet. Mom, what happens now? I looked toward the flickering candle on the table, its flame dancing over the open laptop. Now, I said softly, we find out what she meant. The clock ticked once. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A man's voice came through, firm, official. Mrs. Hart? This is Agent Lowell from Federal Security. We need to speak with you. There's been an update about Lila Grant Hart. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of update? She tried to board a flight tonight, he said. We stopped her at the airport. She's in custody. My knees almost gave out. For a moment, I thought that was it. The end, the closure. But then the agent said something else. Something that froze the breath in my lungs. There's another name connected to the investigation. We believe Martin Cole wasn't her only contact. The news spread fast. Lila Grant Hart arrested in connection to financial misconduct and obstruction of justice. Neighbors whispered in the halls, pretending to be shocked but secretly relieved. For the first time in weeks, the building seemed to exhale. Doors stayed open a little longer. People smiled again, but I couldn't. My stomach wouldn't let me. I thought it was over, that her arrest would bring closure, but peace didn't come. It never does when you know there's still one truth hiding in the dark. 2 days later, I got the call. Mrs. Hart, the officer said, Lila's requested a visit. She says it's urgent. I almost refused, but something in me, curiosity, fear, guilt, made me go. The detention center was cold and smelled like disinfectant. When they led me to the visiting booth, she was already there, pale, unwashed, hair pulled back tight. Even then, she still had that unsettling composure. Evelyn, she said, picking up the phone. Thank you for coming. I didn't come for you, I replied. I came for the truth. She smiled faintly. Then you came for me after all. I stared at her. Did you kill Martin? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked to the guard standing by the door, then back at me. No, she said finally. I didn't. My hand tightened on the phone. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect you to believe anything. I just want you to listen. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with something else. Regret, maybe? I didn't push him, she continued. I wasn't even there when it happened. My chest tightened. Then who was? She looked straight into my eyes. Jonah! I froze. That's a lie. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He didn't mean to. It was an accident. Stop, I snapped. You're just trying to drag him down with you. Her jaw tightened. He came to confront Martin. He found out Martin was going to expose everything. The accounts, my name, the money. Jonah begged him to stay quiet, to protect me, to protect you. Martin refused. They argued in the elevator. It got physical. My pulse pounded in my ears. No, Jonah wouldn't. Ask him, she said softly. He pushed him. Martin fell. The blow was bad. Jonah panicked. He called me. I cleaned it up. I slammed the phone down, shaking. The guard stepped closer, but I didn't care. You're lying, I hissed through the glass. You're trying to save yourself. She leaned forward. Believe what you want, Evelyn. But Jonah's silence will tell you everything. Her eyes, once proud and cold, were almost human for a second. Then she hung up her phone and stood, her shackles clinking faintly as she walked away. I sat there frozen long after she was gone. That night I waited for Jonah to call. He didn't. He didn't come the next day either. Or the next. His phone went straight to voicemail. His office said he was taking personal time. I kept telling myself he was grieving, or afraid, or ashamed, anything but guilty. But by the fourth day, I couldn't breathe under the weight of not knowing. When he finally showed up, it was nearly midnight. The knock at my door was soft, hesitant. I opened it to find him standing there, unshaven, eyes red, his clothes wrinkled as if he hadn't changed in days. "Jonah," I whispered. He stepped inside, avoiding my gaze. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." I tried to sound calm. "Where have you been?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Driving, thinking." I didn't know what to say. "Then just say it," I said. He looked at me finally, and something in his eyes made my knees go weak. "Lila told you, didn't she?" My throat tightened. "She told me something. I want to hear it from you." He sank onto the couch, staring at the floor. It was supposed to be a conversation. "That's all." I stayed silent, gripping the edge of the table for balance. "Martin knew too much," he continued, his voice cracking. "He told me he was going to the police. He said if I didn't stop covering for Lila, everything would blow up. Your name, Dad's estate, all of it." "So you confronted him?" He nodded slowly. "I went to talk, to reason with him. I could barely breathe. We argued," he said, barely audible now. "He said things about Dad, about me. I lost control. I pushed him. Not hard, I swear, not hard enough to—" He broke off, his voice dissolving into a rough, breathless sob. "He fell, Mom. He hit his head. I didn't mean to." I covered my mouth. The room tilted. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. When I finally found my voice, it came out small. "And Lila?" "She came right after. I called her. I didn't know what to do." His eyes filled with tears. "She told me to leave, said she'd handle it. She cleaned up the scene," I whispered. "She made it look like someone else was there." He nodded, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't even know he was dead until the next morning. I felt something deep inside me fracture, a soundless, invisible break. "Jonah," I said softly, "you killed him." He lifted his head, tears streaking his face. "It was an accident." "But he's dead," I whispered. "And you left him there." He stood, desperate now. "Mom, I didn't know what to do. I called her because I thought she could fix it." I panicked. "You should have called the police," I said. "I was scared," he shouted. "I didn't want to lose everything. My career, my name, your trust." His words hit me like stones. I looked at him. My son, the same boy who once brought me handmade cards every Mother's Day, who cried when he broke the neighbor's window because he didn't want to disappoint me. "And now this. I did it for you," he said finally, voice breaking. "I wanted to protect the family. You always said to protect what's ours." Tears blurred my vision. Not like this. The silence between us stretched, suffocating. He dropped to his knees in front of me. "Please, Mom, tell me what to do." I wanted to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay. But the words stuck in my throat like glass, because I didn't know what forgiveness looked like anymore. All I could manage was, "You tell the truth. That's what you do." He shook his head violently. "They'll destroy me." "They should," I whispered. "Because you destroyed someone else." He stared at me, horrified, and I hated myself for the pain in his eyes. But I couldn't take it back. He stood slowly, his voice almost gone. "You're right. I'll go tomorrow." I nodded, unable to speak. When the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor. My whole body felt hollow. How do you love someone after that? How do you separate the man from the mistake? I sat there until dawn, staring at the half-empty glass of water he'd left on the table. That night changed everything. I thought I'd lost my husband once, but losing the image of who my son was, that hurt more. I realized then that truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it breaks every bone on the way out. The house was too quiet that morning, the kind of silence that hums in your ears until you can't tell if it's outside or inside your head. After Jonah's confession, sleep had become a stranger. I wandered the apartment like a ghost, searching for something I didn't yet know existed. My eyes kept landing on the door to Thomas's old study. It had been locked since the funeral. Dust coated the handle. I don't know what pulled me toward it that day. Grief, instinct, maybe both. But I found myself standing there, key trembling in my hand. The moment the door opened, the smell of paper and cedar hit me. His handwriting was everywhere. Notes, ledgers, scraps of numbers pinned to the corkboard. It was like he'd just stepped out for coffee and forgotten to come back. I ran my fingers along the desk, remembering the sound of his pen scratching late at night, the way he'd look up and smile when I brought him tea. Then my hand brushed against something odd beneath the drawer. A tiny metal latch, nearly invisible. Curiosity took over. I pried it open and felt something cold drop into my palm. A key, small, silver, and labeled with 3 letters, MD memory device. My heart started racing. I searched the drawers, and there, taped beneath a stack of old receipts, was a small black USB drive. I plugged it into Thomas's old laptop. The screen flickered, then loaded a single file, for Evelyn. For a second I couldn't breathe. Then I clicked play. The video opened on my husband's face. Older, tired, but still unmistakably him. He was sitting right here in this same room. Martin Cole sat beside him. "Are you recording?" Thomas asked softly. Martin nodded. "Yeah, I think we should have proof." Thomas leaned forward, rubbing his temple. "If something happens to me, you'll tell her. Tell Evelyn everything." My throat tightened. He sighed. "The fraud, it's bigger than we thought. The transfers weren't just through the estate accounts. Someone's been routing money under our names, using my credentials, Martin's too. I tried tracing it, but every path leads back to the same source." Martin looked nervous. "Should we go to the police?" Thomas shook his head. "Not yet. If we make it official, they'll come after her." Her, he meant me. He paused, staring into the camera. "Evelyn, if you ever see this, it means I didn't make it out. And if that's the case, don't trust the people closest to us." My stomach dropped. "Who?" Martin asked. Thomas hesitated. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Jonah doesn't know, but Lila, she's not just involved. She's connected to the people funding it. I think she's been using our accounts to launder money through her family's companies." Martin swore under his breath. "Jesus, Tom, that's—" "I know," Thomas interrupted. "But it gets worse. She's not working alone. There's someone else. Someone inside the building helping her." "Who?" Thomas looked toward the door as if making sure no one was listening. Then he said the name. Even after all this time, hearing it made me go cold. "Greta." I staggered back from the desk. Greta, the building manager. The one who smiled through every lie. The one who told me not to worry when Martin died. In the video, Thomas looked directly into the camera again. "If anything happens to me, Martin, you'll keep Evelyn safe. Get her out if things go wrong." Martin nodded. "I will." Thomas smiled faintly, the way he always did when he thought too far ahead. "Then that's settled. If I don't come back, tell her everything." The screen went black. For a long time, I sat there staring at the blank monitor, hearing my husband's voice echo inside my head. He'd known. He'd seen it all coming, the lies, the danger, even Martin's death. He'd tried to protect me from beyond the grave. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to hold in the sob that broke free anyway. When the tears finally stopped, the grief turned into something else, a hard, sharp clarity. I played the video again, this time paying attention to every sound, every flicker of movement. At the very end, just before the recording cut off, I caught something I hadn't noticed before, a faint reflection in the glass cabinet behind Thomas. Someone else had been standing in the doorway, a tall shadow, watching, listening. Jonah? No, the shoulders were broader, the shape unfamiliar, but it meant Thomas wasn't alone when the recording stopped. Someone had been there, someone who might have ended that conversation permanently. I closed the laptop and sat back, breathing hard. The puzzle pieces I'd been chasing for weeks suddenly fit together, horribly, perfectly. Martin's warning in the elevator, the erased footage, the silence in Greta's eyes, Lila's fear, none of it had been random. And my husband, my careful, meticulous husband, had left me this one final trail to follow. That night, I called Luis. When he picked up, his voice was tense. "Evelyn, you okay?" "I found something," I said. A recording, Thomas and Martin talking about the fraud, about who was behind it. Who? Greta, I whispered. There was a pause. The manager? Yes, and Lila. They were both involved. Thomas knew. He asked Martin to protect me if things went wrong. Louise swore softly. That explains the system access. Greta has top-level clearance. She's been covering their tracks, I said. She knew about everything. Maybe even Martin's death. He hesitated. Evelyn. If she finds out you know, I'm done being afraid, I cut in. Thomas gave me a gift. Proof. I won't waste it. Louise sighed. Then at least let me help you. I might take you up on that. After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a while, the glow of the laptop still faint on the desk. I felt Thomas there, not as a ghost, but as a guide. His voice, his careful planning, the way he'd always believed I was stronger than I thought. And for the first time, I believed it too. I thought about Jonah, my boy, my broken boy. How much of this had he known? Had he realized Lila and Greta were working together? Or had he simply stumbled into their mess, too blind to see the trap around him? Part of me wanted to run to him, to hold him, to promise it could all still be undone. But another part, the colder, clearer part, knew better. Jonah wasn't a child anymore. He'd crossed a line even Thomas hadn't seen coming. And now I had to decide whether to protect my son or to honor the truth my husband died for. I opened the drawer one last time and looked at the small silver key resting in my palm. It was so light, almost weightless. But I knew what it meant now. Thomas hadn't just left me evidence. He'd left me a choice. And in the reflection of the dark screen, I whispered to him, "You didn't fail, Thomas. You saw everything coming. You just couldn't stop it." My voice broke, but my resolve didn't. Now it's my turn. The clock ticked softly in the quiet room as the city lights flickered outside. I could feel the storm building again. One last reckoning waiting to happen. I stood, gripping the USB tightly, and turned toward the door. I wasn't the frightened widow anymore. I was the keeper of my husband's last truth, and someone was going to pay for burying it. It was past midnight when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, hesitant, almost afraid. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. Jonah stood there, pale and hollow-eyed, like someone who hadn't slept in days. His hands were stuffed deep into his pockets, his shoulders trembling under the weight of something too heavy to hide anymore. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He stepped past me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick, heavy with everything left unsaid. He finally whispered, "I saw the video." My heart clenched. "The one from your father's drive?" He nodded, staring at the floor. Dad knew everything, even before it happened. He knew about Lila, about Greta. He even knew I'd get caught in it. I sank into the chair by the table. "Jonah, if you came here to tell me another half-truth..." He cut me off, voice breaking. "No, I came to tell you everything." I waited. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, staring at his hands. That night, Martin called me. He said he was going to the police. He said Lila and I were both in danger if we didn't come clean. I panicked. I went to see him, just to calm him down. My pulse quickened. He was waiting by the elevator, Jonah continued, voice trembling. We started arguing. He said I'd turned into my father, hiding things, lying to protect the wrong people. I lost it, I whispered to Jonah. He looked up, eyes wet. I shoved him, just to make him stop talking. But he fell back, hit his head on the corner of the railing. It wasn't hard, I swear it wasn't, but he went still. The room tilted around me. I gripped the table to steady myself. I didn't mean to hurt him, he said. I tried to wake him up, but there was blood, so much blood. I called Lila. She told me to leave. She said she'd fix it. I did what she said because I couldn't think straight. I just drove away. The confession hung between us like smoke. I closed my eyes. My mind flashed with Martin's gentle smile, his trembling hands the day he slipped me that note. He'd died trying to keep his promise to Thomas, to protect me. When I opened my eyes, Jonah was crying silently. I've lived with it every day since, he said. I hear the sound of him falling every time I close my eyes. I don't deserve to walk free. My throat tightened. You're my son, I whispered. He shook his head. I'm a killer. I reached across the table, touching his hand. No, you made a terrible mistake, but you're not lost yet. He looked up, broken, then helped me do the right thing. The words stabbed straight through me. Every instinct screamed to protect him, to hide him, to fix it the way I'd fixed everything since he was a boy. But Thomas's voice from the video played in my mind. If I don't come back, tell Evelyn everything. He'd wanted truth, not comfort, and truth was the only mercy left. I took a deep breath. We'll go to the station in the morning. He nodded slowly, relief and fear tangled in his eyes. Thank you, Mom. When he finally went to lie down on the couch, I stayed awake at the kitchen table, staring at the dark window. The reflection staring back wasn't the same woman who had walked into that elevator weeks ago. I had seen too much, lost too much, but I still had one thing left to give, my son's last chance to become the man his father believed he could be. By morning, we sat in the police station side by side. The detective, a calm, graying man named Lowell, looked at Jonah with quiet understanding. Mr. Hart, he said, you understand you're here to make a full statement? Jonah nodded. His voice was steady now. Yes, I'm done running. He told them everything. The argument, the shove, the panic, the cleanup. He didn't spare himself, didn't look for pity. And when it was over, the detective just nodded and said softly, We'll take it from here. As they led Jonah away, he turned once, meeting my eyes. I love you, Mom, he said. I love you too, I whispered. Always. Then the door closed behind him. Outside, reporters crowded the entrance, shouting questions. Flashing lights reflected off the rain-soaked pavement, and every word they shouted, confession, arrest, murder, felt like a wound reopening. Luis met me by the curb, umbrella in hand. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I nodded, though my chest ached. It doesn't feel like it. It will, he said. Eventually. But I wasn't sure. Back home, I sat in Thomas's study again, the memory drive still plugged into the laptop. His voice filled the room one last time. If I don't come back, tell Evelyn everything. I did, I whispered. And it broke us. The building outside had gone silent again. Neighbors' doors stayed shut. Greta had resigned after the investigation started. Lila was gone, facing her own trial. And Jonah, my boy, was behind bars. Some nights, I replayed his words over and over. I didn't mean to hurt him. And every time, the same question burned deeper. Could I still forgive him? Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant choosing to see the part of him that was still good, still worth saving. Thomas's words echoed in my memory. Mercy, Evelyn. Not vengeance. So I whispered into the stillness. I'll try. Because maybe giving Jonah up wasn't losing him. Maybe it was the only way to bring him back. The letters keep coming? Yes, I said, folding the envelope back closed. He writes every week. That's good, Luis replied, pouring tea like he'd always known how to fix things with a kettle. Shows he's thinking. Shows he's changing. He's not the same man who stood at my door that night, I said, voice soft. He's quieter, he's smaller in a way. You said he wanted to do the right thing, Luis said. That counts for something. He wanted to stop lying, I said. Not to hurt anyone. That's more than most people can say. I read one of Jonah's letters aloud at the table, trying to hear it the way he meant it. I'm sorry for the nights I was a son who walked away from his mother's pain. I'm sorry for the harm I caused. I want to be better. You miss him? Luis asked gently. Every day, I admitted. But I don't miss the man who chose fear over truth. Ravi stopped by one afternoon with a paper bag of pastries. Neighbors talking? He asked, dropping into a chair. Some, mostly whispers, I said. People are kinder now, but quieter. They didn't like the scandal, he said. But they did like when things felt safe again. The trial had been a spectacle at first. Cameras, questions shouted into rain-slick streets. I heard pieces, evidence, wire transfers, testimony about shell companies, but most of it blurred into a dull roar. The part that mattered was revealed in a courtroom exchange, and I remember the small, precise voice of the prosecutor. Ms. Grant, did you instruct anyone to tamper with building footage? No, she answered, but the look on her face said more than words. You saw her there, I told Luis later. She lied, and the tape proved it. It's difficult to watch someone fall, Luis said, even when they deserve it. I don't want to gloat, I said. I wanted the truth. That's all. On the morning Clara first knocked at my door, I nearly didn't open it. Her hair was longer than in the photo Martin had shown me once. Her hands shook as she pushed the envelope toward me. My father spoke of you, she blurted. He said thank you. You're Martin's daughter? I asked before I could stop myself. Yes, she smiled, fragile. He trusted you to hear his warning. I came to say thank you properly. She sat on my couch, eyes darting to the framed photo of Thomas. I've been trying to understand why he did what he did, she said. Why he chose to warn you? He cared about keeping promises, I said. And he didn't want you to lose him. Clara placed a small locket on my palm. He kept this for you. He said if anything ever happened, you'd know he tried. Tell me about him, I asked. About how you remember him. He laughed a lot, she said, voice trembling. He made me pancakes on Saturdays. He told me not to be afraid of asking questions. And now? Now I try not to be afraid either. We walked to the sealed elevator together the next week, the police tape still thin and yellow. The metal door was cold under my fingers. I pressed my forehead to it and whispered, "Thank you." A small breeze moved a ribbon on the tape. In that moment I felt Martin's presence like a finger on my shoulder. Gentle, resolute. "Did you ever doubt him?" Clara asked softly. "Sometimes," I admitted, but his note saved me. His courage was loudest in silence. Back home, I dug in the dirt of the small patch beneath my window. My hands smelled of earth and something holy. The rose I planted had no guarantee to bloom, but it felt right under my fingers. I spoke as I planted. "For them," I said. "For the ones who tried to keep us safe." "Does it help?" Louise asked one afternoon, watching me prune. "It does," I said. "It's a kind of work that asks nothing of me but patience." Letters from Jonah changed tone over the months. He described a routine of reading and quiet work, a small job in the prison library that seemed to steady him. "I shelved books today," one letter said. "I found a passage about people who rebuild their houses after storms. I thought of you. Tell him I read that," I said aloud to no one in particular. "Tell him I thought of him too." When reporters returned for Lila's civil hearing, they asked the same questions in sharper voices. "Did you conspire to defraud the estate?" She sat with her lawyer, face drawn but defiant. "I was protecting my husband," she said. "I did what I thought was best." "You endangered people," the journalist shot back. "I was scared," she replied. "So were we all." "I don't believe that anymore," Ravi said later. "There are shades of fear and shades of self-preservation. People can be both frightened and cruel," I said. "That's the hardest part." One quiet Sunday, Clara brought her father's old notes. We sat on my small balcony, sun warming our knees, and read them together. He had written in careful pen, "If they ask, tell the truth. If the truth hurts, let it be the cure." "I never knew he could write like that," Clara murmured. "It reads like a promise." "Promises are heavy," I said. "But they're also maps." The building settled into a new rhythm. New faces moved in. Children's laughter returned to the hallways, bright and careless. The elevator lights blinked as people rode up and down without the old suspicion in their eyes. I'd stand in the lobby now and watch, feeling like a different kind of witness. Not to secrets, but to small recoveries. Not everything mended. Julia across the hall still covered her mirror after dark. The Peterson twins spoke less loudly, as if trying not to wake old ghosts. But I could see small openings, a neighbor bringing soup to another, a child's drawing taped to a door. Those were the stitches. Jonah's letters grew steadier. "I read in the library today about redemption," he wrote once. "It said you don't earn it overnight. You live it." I told him to keep writing, I said, to tell himself the truth each time. When he came home 2 years later, thinner but calmer, he stood in the doorway and looked at the rose I'd planted. "You kept it," he said, voice small. "I kept everything," I replied. "You kept yourself." He knelt and touched the soil like a blessing. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I know," I said. "And I forgive you. Not because it erases what happened, because I'd rather teach you how to live with it than teach you to bury it." Clara waved from across the courtyard, holding her daughter's hand. She smiled at me in a way that said we'd found a hesitant kind of family in the ruins. Louise passed by with a bag of groceries for someone who couldn't get out, and Ravi stopped to chat about pruning times. The building had a quieter heartbeat now. I still think of Thomas and Martin most days. I still whisper thanks to a metal door and trace the pages of the memory device like a relic. But I read Jonah's letters, I open my door to neighbors again. Peace is not a flood. It's a garden that requires tending. The rose I planted that spring burst into a small, determined bloom. I cupped it in my palm and felt something like a future. Not clean or painless, but honest. As I pressed the soil down around the stem, I asked aloud, not sure if anyone would answer. What do we do now with the life we've been given? The morning light spread across my tiny kitchen table as I placed the last of the documents into a drawer and closed it gently. My fingers lingered on the handle, as though letting go of the papers meant letting go of the past. Jonah's latest letter sat beside my cup. His words echoed in my head. I'm learning to live with truth, one slow day at a time. I took a deep breath and smiled quietly. We're getting there, I whispered. Both of us. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a soft breath, a steady hand, a step forward without shaking. And today, I finally felt steady. If this story moved you, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from, and what would you do in my place?